Hey there, children. Do you know what I like? Talk about things about how good they are. You know what I don't like? Being constrained. I found I'm unable to talk about Doctor Who Extremis without dissecting the episode on its own. And it's a bit like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. If you know the ending, the rest of the story might not work for you anymore. This is your pre-arbitrary 30-second intro warning. I am absolutely going to spoil the ever-loving daylights out of this episode. Like, I know that the intro says spoilers anyway, but this one is very, very much so. So Extremis is the 6th episode of the 10th series of Doctor Who, the relaunch that came back in 2005. And it's written by Stephen Moffat, and as we all know, the internet hates Stephen Moffat. Boo! But personally, I quite like most of his episodes. I'll be absolutely honest that not all of them work. I mean, there's huge critical acclaim for Listen, but it doesn't quite work for me. And he gets a lot of flack for his finales as well. My issues with Stephen Moffat are usually quite minor. It's just that I usually feel that he sets up a lot, but then doesn't actually resolve everything. Luckily, Extremis actually solves some of the questions we were asking in the series and sets up upcoming episodes. So, it not being a finale actually works in its favour. The Doctor is still blind and he gets the actual papal guard, like the people that work for the Pope, in his classroom. And you think that with the way it starts off, that we're in for a romp, but it's actually a very slow building episode. There's a monster of the week, but they don't seem to be like a looming threat. They're not lurking in corners, killing off cast members one by one like we're used to the last couple of episodes. Instead we get scary stone-faced monks, and that's just the name they're given at this point. Supposedly we're going to find out more about them. By the way, I found a hat that fits my head. So the Doctor is given the task to read a document called the Veritas, like Latin word for truth. And this truth drives anybody who reads it to suicide. So the Doctor, Bill and Nardole, they go to the Vatican after a great scene where the Pope jumps out of Bill's bedroom shouting, "It's bigger on the inside" in Italian. And the Doctor sets off to read the Veritas. He sends off Bill and Nardole to go check out the rest of the library. If it seems like I'm skipping lots of things and we're already near the ending, that's actually the truth. This episode takes its sweet time. It's trying to create a creeping sense of foreboding of what this truth could be. Particle physicists and religious people, what is the single truth that drives both of them to suicide? In fact, a lot of this episode actually revolves around suicide, and it's not done in a way for shock deaths. It actually shows us more about characters' crumbling sense of self, about how awful that thing they now know is taking a toll on them. We don't actually get to see any gore or people jumping off or actually firing a weapon. Bill and Nardole quickly end up in both the Pentagon and then a science facility, of which the occupants are about to blow themselves to kingdom come. Here's where they find out they're being compelled to say a series of numbers, but the truth behind that is not given straight away. Nardole actually managed to figure out that the portal room is not a portal room, it's a form of a projection, a projected virtual reality, and unfortunately for him, he's part of it. In the meantime, the Doctor's been on the run from the monks, and Bill managed to trace him to the Oval Office, with a dead president sitting in the corner. And here it is where we find out the crux of the story. Basically, they're all in a matrix. They're all living simulated lives, and they are not the real deal. Bill is not Bill, Nardole wasn't Nardole, and the Doctor is not really the Doctor. Now, One thing I haven't talked about yet is the flashbacks.
Tijd voor een flashback.
A mission to...
You might think that the flashbacks were actually about the story, about what's going on with the Extremis, but they are completely unrelated and they just solve the question, what's in the vault? The entire time we spent with Missy and the Doctor is actually about two pieces of dialogue. The first one is when Nardole is saying he's licensed to kick the Doctor's ass. This flashback occurs before we see him say it to Bill. This, alongside the series of numbers, is giving the implication that the characters inside the simulation are unable to create anything really new. They are basically just saying what they've been programmed to say. Which leads to the second piece of dialogue, which I'll refer to in a minute. So the Doctor, at least the simulated Doctor, has realised that he's not real. For simulation, he's pretty darn good. He's figured out who the monks are, he's figured out their plan and what the simulation is for. And better yet, the entire time he's been walking around with the sonic specs and they actually serve a function in the story. And this is where the second piece of dialogue comes in. Being programmed with just memories of the past, the simulated Doctor remembers without reward, without witness. So he does exactly what everybody else does when the Earth's in trouble. He makes contact with the real Doctor. When I first saw this episode, most of it didn't do much for me. The flashbacks being interwoven with the story felt like Moffat was doing more of his jumbled storytelling, like he's a big fan of, like in The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. The fact that they only really had relevance for the episode's opening and the episode's closing, which took place in the quote-unquote real world, helped a lot for me. The entire simulation might feel like, ooh, it was all a dream, cop-out, but by having its main character being able to influence the outside world by making contact with the genuine Doctor actually prevented the series of events we had been watching having no meaning. The biggest downside I find though, I rewatched this episode, but by knowing the trick beforehand, it doesn't give you any extra insight. I've mentioned M. Night Shyamalan before, but like if you watch The Sixth Sense or The Village, then you can actually pick up certain clues on a rewatch and you'll be like, oh, but that is why his wife stood up from the table. Unfortunately, within this episode, there's nothing like that. The only thing I could discover were, like I said, the pieces of dialogue in the flashbacks. But they're a bit minor, and to be honest, I'm not even quite sure the bit about license to kick the Doctor's ass, or if it's just Nardole's only boast in his book. Anyway, I really did like this episode. I'm just saying, it has very little rewatch value for me. Things I really like, the 12th Doctor's actually quite caring for Bill, telling her to ask that girl out for a date. That's sweetness. Nardole showing up at the execution and using his brains and his wits and actually giving a few badass lines, plus with the added bit of him trying to be grandstanding, that was great. And it's still stuck to the main roots of him being a bit of a coward, because the moment he sees a dead body he goes, "Ah!" I'd like to say I was happy to see Missy again, but she really didn't do anything, and at the moment I'm not sure if she's planning something or if it was her intention all along. We finally know what's in the vault, and I think most of us already guessed that. Biggest bit of all, they managed to sneak in a two-parter without telling any of us. So the next episode is the pyramid at the end of the world, like the first proper Doctor Who title of this series. Features the monks, features the fictional upcoming World War III with China and Russia. As the 4th Doctor once said, maybe we'll even see a peeking homunculus. Weirdest of all, the Doctor is still blind. I was expecting this episode to undo that, but apparently he still is next episode, and it might just stick for the rest of the series. So, yeah. So I've been feeling pretty good about myself recently. Here's your chance to undo that. Find me on my many social medias like LinkedIn, Goodreads, and some things called Facebook and Twitter. And tell me that my taste is crap. If you subscribe now, it won't mean a thing. And press that like button, because several years ago YouTube got rid of its star rating. Do you guys remember the star ratings? I don't. So, Achtung! And I'll see you next time on Doctor Who Exactly.